and welcome to Spiritually Speaking. I'm Pastor Stacy Shelton. I serve Medford First Christian Church, and this is Father Joel Maiorano, who is the head of spiritual care at Rogue Valley Manor. And we are going to share today about Psalm 139.
Great. We're going to read verses 1 through 17, and then 23 and 24.
Yeah.
And I believe this is one of Pastor Stacy's favorite.
It is a big fave. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love it too, but I didn't want to steal your thunder.
Thank you.
It is one of your favorite.
Yeah. I'll fight you for it.
And I'll lose. Psalm 139. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know where I sit and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all of my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand should hold me fast.
If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God! How vast is the sum of them! I try to count them. They are more than the sand. I come to the end. I am still with you. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my thoughts. See if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. This is the word of God, and it can be trusted.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, today I'm with Josephina. That's my new name for you.
Yeah.
The coat of many colors.
Coat of many colors.
Yeah, wow. There's pretty.
Some colors on here, all right.
You're keeping me lit up, man.
Yeah, there you go. Bringing light into the world, right?
That's, your shirt is so symbolic of this psalm.
Hey, all right.
Yeah, it brings light. It brings light into my life.
Yes.
And it brings hope. And, in this time of transition, both in Washington, D.C., and questions, and even more concerns about the pandemic and COVID, this psalm is an eye-opener. Mm-hmm. It's a source of light.
Yeah.
When I think of this psalm, I think of a couple of questions and a couple of thoughts that will help review this passage. And we noticed in the very beginning how aware David is that God is all around him and always with him.
Yeah.
Where can I go? Where can I go from your spirit? Second, we notice how aware David is that God is leading and guiding him through even the most darkest seasons. Your hand will guide me, and even the darkness will not be dark to you. Third, we notice how David is that he realizes that he is beautifully and wonderfully made and an object of God's love. In verse 11, he was knit in his mother's womb. Many of God's thoughts are about us. God's thoughts. We were in his thought even before we were in our mother's wombs. And notice how aware David is of his own destiny, his future, even in a time of conflict. We are in the mind of God even before we were born. And fifth, we notice that David has a place to share his frustration, his anger, his loss, his anxiety, and he's got a person that will hear him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are the 5 things. I thought we could talk about those briefly.
Well, and it's such a... I really shy away from the end of this psalm because the part we cut out is a little bloody, and I don't love it. However, like listening to you kind of recap in that way, for me, it's there's a fullness in it, especially when you include the end of kind of all of the aspects of relationship with God, and sometimes it is kind of bloody,
Right.
And so, don't want to ignore the harder parts of that, even though sometimes they aren't that appealing to me. But yeah.
I'm one that say that we've got to share, and we've got to express, and we've got to discern and digest our emotions. Mm-hmm. And on Friday, even on my retreat day last week, I talked with a resident, and she said people have come up to her and say, you should be so happy, you should do this. And I said, that's not helpful. I want you to express, I want you to journal, I want you to share this pain that's going on in your heart. Mm-hmm. Expose the pain to light, expose it to God, and expose it to one another. And then last night I was with a patient at the hospital who lost their wife, and they were in shock. Mm-hmm. And I said, let's talk not only about your experiences of how you met your spouse, but also about the pain you're feeling right now. I think it's very important that we properly, if possible, express what's going on, and share it so it doesn't become like a cancer and eat us inside.
Yeah, well, and I think for me, and maybe this isn't a universal experience, but in especially kind of young adulthood, maybe late teens, had this perception of like I could only talk to God in specific ways that had to be kind of fluffy and pretty and light, right? And only good things. And I think for one of the things the psalm really draws out for me is, yes, we do want to have those kind of more positive interactions with God, but it's a reminder God can take the other as well, and it isn't, we don't need to protect God from our anger or our angst, and when you think about like how God created us, and that being with the fullness of who we are, I just think like anger is built into that,
It's part of our humanity.
Yeah, exactly. And I can't imagine God condemning us for the things that God created in us, and those things can produce incredibly good things, and so trying to embrace that in its fullness. Yeah.
I remember when I first became a chaplain years ago, I walked into a room, and I'm not sure I do this now. We grow in different ways. But I walked in the room and said, I'm angry with God. And I know I shouldn't be angry with God. And I just interrupted the person. I said, I'm angry with God too. Want to talk?
Why are you?
Yeah. Why are you? I'm pretty upset about what God did, this morning. Yeah, or I'm getting older. Sometimes we project on God.
Yes. Well, for sure.
Yeah. We project
it's
our anger on God.
Almost non-optional, right?
Sometimes anger that we should have towards God, we project on our loved ones.
Yeah.
Or the poor guy who walks down the street and cuts us off.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first part that I talked about, we know that God is all around him and always with him. I think probably that is the one feeling that gives me the most security, is when I go through conflict, when I go through trauma, when I go through loss, when I go through crisis, I am most secure when I realize I am not walking alone.
Yeah.
I'm not walking alone. Now, sometimes I might not feel sometimes I might not feel the presence of God. I have never thought God was absent from me. When I get mad, or I get confused, or I get disgruntled, I don't necessarily feel like God is absent from me. Sometimes I don't even want God to be around me.
Right.
You know,
not now, God.
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm a little bit more direct than that. Yeah, it's not that I don't feel God's absence. I feel God's absence. I always feel God's presence. But sometimes I want him out. I'm mad. I'm mad at him, or I'm mad at the situation, or I'm confused, and I just want to be by myself.
Yeah.
And I know the beauty of it is I know God is still there with me, and He's giving me that time for Joel.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say these words, you hemmed me in behind him before. Those are words that are pretty deep in me at this point. And I, especially moments of fear, that is the sense that comes to me. And that protection piece has been something that's pretty important for me in facing particularly challenging things. So
yeah,
I'm holding that one pretty heftily right now, actually. So
right. The second thing we talked about is notice how aware David is that God is leading and guiding him even in the most darkest seasons. And that goes back to number one, I'm not alone. I'm not walking down this path alone. And not only that, if I look, and it's one of the first things I do in the midst of spiritual direction with residents or clients that I have, is I said, where do you think God is showing himself, herself to you in the midst of your life right now?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I never really asked that question. Well, what do you think? Is God showing up in the caregiver who comes over? Is God showing up in the newspaper that comes? Is God showing up in a feeling that you had or an experience that you're reflecting on? That's the first thing. Where's God? Where's God showing themselves to you? And even in the midst of the darkness.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, especially in the darkness, I think too. I just was thinking about the days right before and right after my father passed away. I've never felt so close to God, even though I was pretty devastated by his passing. There were just so many moments of people being incredibly loving around me, and it was a very thin place during that time, and so have a pretty huge sense of God's presence, particularly during difficult times. There have been others that it's been harder to find, but
right.
Yeah.
Parker Palmer, who's struggled, a great writer, he struggled with depression, said sometimes I saw the light, not in anything anyone had said, but the second time he went through a very, very, very deep depression, very dark area of his life, he said the person who came over and just rubbed my feet, didn't talk to me, didn't say anything to me, didn't even ask me any questions. All he did was come and give me sacred touch. And I could really feel a sense of the presence, the sacredness. And sometimes when I'm seething with either anger or deep discouragement, I hear God encouraging me to share it, not suppress it, not tell me not to do it,
right?
But share it, let it come out, let that darkness come out of you, and labor with a friend or another pastor to walk with you on this journey. Because no one should be left alone with their darkness.
It's really true. And
the passage says, darkness may be dark to me, but it's not dark to you, God.
No.
It's not dark to you. Even what I think is darkness, your light intercedes.
Which is a pretty beautiful thing right now. Just on Sunday, we talked a little bit about just it doesn't matter who you are or what your political affiliation is right now. We're all a little afraid, and or a lot afraid, some of us, and that it feels like if we can't agree on anything, we can agree on that. And for me, that whole piece of darkness is as light to God, and just kind of it's almost a repetitive thing right now for me to remind myself of that that light always comes in the morning, and it feels like kind of a dark time right now, but that light will come.
Yeah, joy cometh in the morning. Yeah. I love how you said that. People are scared, and we can agree on that, and we can maybe agree to move towards safety.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Unfortunately, we have different ideas of what moving towards safety looks like, so that makes it challenging.
We have a hard time listening too.
Yeah.
We have a hard time listening to people we don't agree with.
It's so true.
Yeah.
I
mean, I'm barely listening to you right now.
That's nothing new. It's, when you agree with me, you barely listen to me.
Yeah. I barely listen to me.
The next part is my favorite.
I knew it.
Bottom line, I am a knitter though, so that is part of it. But for it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I love the feminine imagery with attached to God. I think that's so beautiful. And while I know a lot of male knitters, strangely enough, it's still sort of a feminine event, knitting, and especially as this was written. So I love that. But I do love, the intimacy of that is what really speaks to me. And as much as, we've not touched on it that much, but kind of that intimate, the contrast between the corporate relationship with God and the personal, intimate relationship with God. I'm a big believer that both of those need to happen.
Yes.
But this text for me is like, this is the intimate relationship with God that is the most comforting for me. And just love to sit in that and think that this could be true,
Yeah.
I really, really love it.
That, you hit it right on the head for me. That makes me feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes me feel safe.
Yeah.
And it just makes me feel beloved.
Yeah.
Part of a beloved community.
Exactly.
I knit.
Are you a knitter, Joel?
Well,
what?
Let me clarify. There's you can only take so much what I say to be the truth. When
you hold yarn. And sometimes touch a needle.
Not even that.
No needles involved.
No, when I joined the service, this is going to show you how much of a mama's boy I am.
Okay, let's hear it.
Before I joined the military at 18, I learned how to, I'm ashamed, but I'm going to say it.
Oh, no.
I learned how to wash my clothes.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Hey, you're ahead of a lot of folks. Unfortunately.
I learned how to polish my shoes.
Well, you have to in the military.
And I learned how to knit, especially if buttons came off, or if I had to sew patches, or if I had to knit my socks.
Did you actually knit your socks, or you sewed them?
Now
this is where Joel's gonna get in trouble because he doesn't know the difference between knitting and sewing. Was there yarn or string involved, or thread? Yeah. Okay. So Joel can sew.
I'm gonna plead the fifth because anything I say now is going to be made fun of me for years to come.
Yes, it is. It's too late.
I sew, not knit. So I obviously was perpetrating. I never knitted, but I did sew.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And he has touched yarn before.
Destiny. I'm not a big person on destiny, but we see it here. As I get older and I think about my lineage and I think about who I'm going to bless, I begin to think about legacy, and I think about what my future will look like. Mm-hmm. And here we notice David is aware of what's going to be taking place and what has taken place in his future. And I think a lot of discouragement, especially in COVID and especially around isolation, is you don't know. You don't know. And so this is where I think some of the wonderful tools in the tool belt of most Christians, we can live into testimony and we can live in the prophecy, not necessarily prophecy as in the saying that this is going to happen in the future and I prophetically think it, but living in the prophecy, we can speak truth, our truth of this is what we want to do in the future. And this is where God's going to help me engage in the things that I want to do in the future. That's what I mean by prophecy here.
This is actually part of the text that I struggle with the most, I think for similar reasons, but I really struggle with this concept of God's will, and that the dance that concept does with free choice, which I think we have been given. And sometimes, while I like the concept in some ways of like God, took the time to write this all out, how this was all going to take place, I am so stubborn and ornery that there's this part of me that really bucks up against that. And from early, like 11 and 12 years old, that has been probably my biggest struggle with Christian concepts is around this tension, where I have, maybe this isn't helpful, but I'm going to share it anyway, I guess. Where I have come around with that is I do feel like God has a direction in each decision I make that God would prefer me to go. And I either do it or I don't. That's my free will in it. And then God sort of resets with me, like, oh, okay, we're going to go down this path. And then these are the areas that God might be calling me down. But to some of this whole, it's written in the book and this is how it is, it just pushes buttons for me.
Pushes buttons, yeah. I also too, Arminian, I believe in free will. But the fact is, I don't think we have much of it. I think we're conditioned. I think we're nurtured. I think we're raised. I think we're born. I think we have genes that automatically condition us to make decisions that we think we know, or that we think we have choice over.
Right.
And we don't have very much choice. And I think that's why it's so important that when we do engage in decision making, we also invite discernment, so that we can really allow our free will to be engaged, versus acting like a computer and just doing what the next sequence of events are. And so
that's pretty awesome. So what's your take home for this week?
I think for me this week has been very busy doing pastoral care, doing counseling, doing grief work, just even to remind me in the midst of the everyday ministry or everyday activity around crisis that I'm not alone. When I enter into a hospital room, when I enter into a situation, an apartment, when I enter into an ambulance, that I'm not alone. The Spirit of God and all the people who made a difference in my life in the many years that I've lived are with me as well.
I'm right there too. I also, as I've kind of been pondering this, the piece of that whole piece of God knitting me together in my mother's womb, the realization that is true for all of humanity, and sometimes I don't want it to be. That
I appreciate your honesty.
I want to be special, and set apart, but the reality is I am special, and so is everyone else. And in this time of kind of divisiveness and creating, barriers between one another, to remember this text is true about you as well as me. And I think that calls me to a different level of listening and understanding and communication than if I would choose to think that I'm the special one, and you're not.
Right.
But you are.
Yeah, thank you. You're almost propelling me. I'm going to go into the office later today and tell Debbie Watt, one of my coworkers, she's special too.
I'm sure she'll value that and appreciate it.
Yeah, and I really, she'll say, "Do you really mean that? That you think that?" And I'll say, "Pastor Stacy told me to say it."
You say, "The Bible told me so."
Yeah, got it. The Bible told me so. That's right. Well, the coat of many colors, and I wish you a wonderful week. Have
yes, we do.
Wonderful day.
Bye-bye.